real quick too, I guess.
All right, it's live now.
All right. Hello. Thank you for listening to Diploma Stories podcast. My name is Nick, and joining me on the line is Ghost Politics, my conservative counterpart. Hello, Ghost. How are you?
I'm doing fine. How are you doing on this evening? And I'm a classical liberal, not a conservative, man. I just want to be left alone to my own business.
All right, then. Well, we'll delve into that at some point. I am doing well. I am currently watching MACtion. The MAC championship is on until 6 o'clock when the Washington plays, which is the obviously the game of the night. But anyways, today we're going to discuss the state of surveillance in this country. We'll go through the issues of mass surveillance poses, as well as discuss the historical and political ramifications. Just as a little bit of a note, because we want to be transparent here, we did already record this, but somebody forgot to record their mic, so this is take 2 on our discussing this topic. So hopefully we're a little bit more refined, and I promise you that our future podcasts will not be this refined. Also, one thing I can promise our listeners, or listener, depending on how many we have, one other thing I can promise is that this is probably going to be the last podcast where we're not yelling at each other more. We both generally tend to agree on this topic, but we're going to go through and discuss it from a couple different perspectives and go from there. Just a little bit of house cleaning. Remember to check out our website at wordpress.com/diplomasports. Look for us on Facebook at facebook.com/diplomasports. And Ghost, do you want to tell them about our other social media?
Yes, you can also find us at diploma_sports on Twitter and on Gab under the same tag or whatever. I don't know the official term for it. We're also on Minds as Diploma Sports. We're trying to establish our presence across various up-and-coming social media platforms. We hope those take off because I think there's a lot of interesting things going on those platforms and a lot of untapped markets there. We have our Facebook page at Diploma Sports, and probably going to get a few more social media things in the tubes just so we can, get this out to more and more people.
Yes, and if you want to participate, if you want to suggest articles, topic ideas, anything of that nature, feel free to reach out with that to us. Please let us know if we said anything wrong. Our job ultimately here is to be accurate and to provide decent information from different perspectives. So if we did mess something up or a date was just completely wrong, please let us know so we can correct it. Okay, and now that that's out of the way, let us begin. So starting with looking at surveillance, I guess the first key point is a lot of this has come to light because of Edward Snowden. Now, if you don't know who Edward Snowden is, he was an NSA contractor who discovered what the government was doing in regard to mass surveillance, took a lot of that data and leaked it to The Guardian, to a couple reporters that I very much respect that work for that institution. They took that, and now the world knows about what we're doing. This can range anywhere from spying on leaders of foreign nations to obviously working to try to prevent terrorism, to also then just spying on everyday Americans, which both my partner Ghost and I think is completely ridiculous, and is clearly an invasion of our rights.
Well,
go ahead.
Jump in there. Well, the specific invasion is it's an unlawful search and seizure. Obviously, this is a violation. There was no due process for the PRISM program, which was a program I believe, correct me if I'm wrong on this, please, it was a mass surveillance program on U.S. citizens that involved mass collection of data, phone calls, emails, and various other things that legally the government has no right to. It's done a probable cause, and even when they would, in certain cases, they would go to secret courts, and they would get rulings that pretty much was just a judge going, "Oh, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this." Well, there wasn't. Normally, in this country, you get to defend yourself in a court of law when you're being accused, and you have the right to face your accuser, even if that accuser is the federal government.
Yeah, exactly, and I mean we. A right that we have in this country is a right to privacy, a right to be able to not be looked at by the government unless they have a warrant, as you said. So let's just start on, just in case viewers or listeners rather, don't really know anything about this issue. This really all stemmed, the first paranoia really started in the book 1984, but aside from that, the actual thing that started all this was obviously in response to 9/11. The government started passing bills sort of under the American people's nose about that sort of extended the power of the executive branch, extended the power of the national
Patriot
security,
Act and the reauthorization of the Patriot Act and various
and the
other.
continual reauthorization of the Patriot Act. Yes, so that's kind of where we are at this point. Obama, my dearly beloved Obama, has done nothing to make this any better. In fact, you could argue that he has made it much worse, extended those powers, and done nothing really to stand up for what I think is a right that shouldn't be taken away from us. So I guess we'll start with that. I want to go a little bit out of order of what we did last time, just to kind of see. Let's just stick with the president, the discussion about the president now. Obviously, we have the introduction of a new, very interesting person in the White House, and his sort of reaction to all of this is going to be very interesting. Is he someone that is going to be worse than Obama on this? Is he someone that is going to extend the Patriot Act, extend these sort of warrantless search and seizures of people's data and all of that fun stuff, or is he actually maybe going to take a better stance on this? Question to you, actually, as I ponder all this out loud, is the Trump administration, you think, better on this than if Hillary would have won, than her administration would have been on this? What would be your thoughts on that?
Well, that is an easy question to answer. I believe that there is a chance Trump may, and it's not a high chance, there's a small chance he may roll back some of the undemocratic, unconstitutional measures of the Patriot Act and various other surveillance laws. There is a small chance. I think there was no chance that a Hillary Clinton presidency would have done that, and I believe she would have used that to spy on her enemies. She was a very Nixonian candidate, and I think she would have used that to its full potential. Now, do I think Trump is going to not reauthorize the Patriot Act? Probably not. I don't think he wants to piss off the neocons in his party. I think he, unfortunately, has to break bread with the more aggressive neocon and less people who are willing to sacrifice their privacy and are like, oh, if you have nothing, I have nothing. If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. Wing of the party. Unfortunately, I would love for him to repeal the Patriot Act and help expand government transparency. But fortunately, Julian Assange and Edward Snowden are doing a lot of work to make the Obama administration the most transparent administration in history. But no,
that's one thing you can say. Well, okay, yeah, and let's just look around discuss the politics of this for a little bit. I guess this is kind of a strange issue because it isn't really a liberal conservative. There isn't really a lot of a dividing line there. I would say that people on both sides are equally outraged by this, but yet it still seems to be highly popular. Generally speaking, if you ask anybody over 40, I feel like their response is going to be the same response that you talked about, where it's if you're not doing anything wrong, you're not hiding anything.
And I disagree with that position heavily. I'm just kind of giving the argument that a lot of the neocons and people of that persuasion.
Oh no, certainly, I understand that, and obviously I disagree with that as well. I think when you look at it, well, here I'll let you. Why is that absurd? Why is that something to disagree with?
I have a pretty compelling case. It doesn't matter if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. One, the government has no right to access that data. And much more importantly, data is insanely valuable. And there are all kinds of bad actors and even just mild actors, advertisers or, people that want to steal your email accounts or your bank accounts. All of that information was also being gathered in their mass collection program of PRISM. Now, as we've seen by the 2016 election, just how much was leaked and how easily the government was hacked. Even if you're doing nothing wrong, you can still get your social security numbers stolen by the government if for some reason you had it on a public, somewhere public, or you could get your bank account stolen, or you could have your credit card stolen. All these things just because the government is incompetent at their own cybersecurity. And we know we aren't great at cybersecurity, and it's a very tough thing to protect. Pretty much two-way encryption on both ends is the only way to protect it, and we know the government wasn't even encrypting all this information they were illegally storing. So all these Chinese hackers, Russian hackers, and even just other nefarious actors around the world are hacking into our data, and they're learning about you and selling that to nefarious corporations that will use it for their own personal gain and less reputable actors as well. So this is why I think if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear argument completely falls on its face. It doesn't matter. It's a non-argument for that. It's just your data is important regardless of if you're doing anything wrong.
Yeah, no, and that's completely fair. I don't think I could have answered it better myself. So why then do you think that both parties seem to just because Dianne Feinstein Democratic senator from here in California, basically said that Edward Snowden was a terrorist and that these things are protecting people. Now, I mean, the evidence seems to suggest that we really aren't reducing that much terror by using this mass surveillance. So why are both parties so eager to just continue this? I mean, I know there's branches of both parties that are against it, but it just seems strange to me that in such a divided country, we really do seem to pretty much agree on this.
You've already answered the question, and by posing it. The answer is when there are people dying, when there are terror attacks every week, and you saw the bloodshed that was this summer in Europe, all the various attacks that happened there. You had the Paris attacks. You just had the Ohio State attacker. And I want to say, if for some reason that college police officer is listening, thank you. Thank you for stopping more people from dying. Good thing no one died because someone acted quickly. But
I think I could be wrong, but I feel like it doesn't matter. We don't need to get into the specifics of that tragedy. I mean, obviously, there's the horrible tragedies that happen all the time. But sorry,
but this is my point: is that and it's a lot. There's a lot of people who either they're I mean, granted, all their data is valuable and all of their lives can be ruined by their data. But I think there's a lack of information on that topic, and there's a lot of people who don't know just how much damage can be done if your data is compromised. It's insanely. It can ruin your life. If you have your data compromised, all these things. But the reality is when people are dying and the people think, oh, there was a 1 out of 1 millionth of a percent chance that we could have intercepted an email of, I don't know, Abu whatever the fuck the head of ISIS's name is, had sent like kill orders to someone. Perhaps we could have sent cops to their house and Minority reported them before they committed their crime. There's like this weird fantasy we have that we could actually make that happen. And that's why these people are willing to sacrifice these privacy rights, because they think, well, I'm not doing anything wrong. They don't take into account the calculus of the security issues of their own data. And they're just like, no, I just want to be safe. I want to have a chance of being saved. It's unfortunately, it doesn't work.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Like a lot of things we do, the results are not necessarily what we intended. So going back to that point, because I think this is a valid question. I mean, can you say that we're taking the war on terrorism seriously if we reduce the NSA's power and reach? I mean, now my answer to that question would be no. I would say, in fact, that we're strengthening it because I think a paranoid and overreaching government here is not doing us any service, and if anything, is making ISIS's goal, easier. But that's what many people would say is that we are fighting a war on terror. This is a very different terrorism. Just and to your point, if there is a small chance, then we have to do this, and you're not taking American lives seriously if you do that. So. Yeah, basically, I'm just touching upon that as well, too.
Yeah, and to be clear, it's not just Islamic terrorism. I mean, that's a huge part of it, unfortunately, in this day and age. But, there's people also like, what if we could have stopped Dylan Roof or, the other few crazies, the crazy people? What if, we could have been like, oh, wow, this guy's really getting into these really weird things. We can track them. And it's like, well, one, the government has no right to do that and should not. And two, it's really just one, unfortunately. The government, that's where the buck stops. They don't have the right to do that, and unfortunately, at the end of the day, people just have to be vigilant. You have to be like, well, my neighbor's being weird. They're bringing assault rifles into their house, and they're leaving their small child with their grandparents, and this is a bit of awkward behavior around not being in the holidays. I think people have to be vigilant. And I'm not saying everyone should be reporting their brown neighbor just because if they like shooting, but if they have 20 people visit their house bringing weapons over, then maybe it's okay to ask questions. But the reality is you should be have a good enough relationship with your neighbor that you can talk to them about that. And if you don't have that relationship with your neighbor,
I think what I can sum up with this is that it seems like the government and people in general seem to be pretty lazy on this. We seem to want our cake and eat it too. I think that's a general trend with Americans in general is we want to have, we want to fight this war effort, but we don't want to have to ration at home. We certainly don't want things to get in the way of our own personal luxury in our own life. So while preventing terrorism sounds great, wouldn't it just be easier to spy on all these people? Like you said, I haven't done anything wrong, so why should I care if people's rights are being infringed? It's better than you having to meet my neighbor.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, I would see that that the American people's response seems to just be that of apathy and ignorance. I mean, ultimately, I think that's why what Edward Snowden did was so important, and why he should be in fact pardoned. Not even necessarily even
in the first place.
yeah. Even if you argue that he did leak, leaked secret documents and that's illegal and et cetera, and that he's still, a criminal in a sense, he still ultimately led to educating a lot of youth. And most people, what they knew about this was mostly just conspiracy theories, types of, oh, the government's spying on you, like I said, 1984 kind of paranoia.
A lot of conspiracy theories
really showed that this actually is going on. And for that, he should be commended. And like I did on our first taping, Obama, if you're listening to this podcast, which I'm sure you will be one day, hopefully, then please pardon Edward Snowden in the next month before crazy orangutan takes power. Please pardon Edward Snowden.
Hey, orange is the new black. Come on, man. But more importantly, no, because Obama won't pardon him. I mean, if he did, it'd be probably the proudest I'd have been of my president. Please, President-elect Trump, pardon Edward Snowden and pardon Julian Assange. Not just because Julian Assange was de facto your ally by virtue of exposing corruption, but because Julian Assange is merely a facilitator for leakers and he protects sources. And we are not an authoritarian government that hunts down dissidents.
I think we will be soon enough, though. Or at least that's the concern.
We always have to be vigilant. That's part of the social contract we have as Americans. We have to be vigilant.
And that's what I will say for you. I mean, we vehemently disagree on these things, but I'm sure if Trump starts locking people up for no apparent reason, you will be the first person to call him out on it. So I do commend you for that. You're not like the average Republican or the average Democrat that just kind of toes the party line. And I will hope to call out Obama and any Democrat on the same if they're doing something that I disagree with as well.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, like the president-elect did something I very much disagreed with. He was, now granted, this wasn't official policy, but he was proposing to, punishments for flag burning. And, for me, it's like, oh, come on, man. That's not cool. That's a First Amendment right. It's a disgusting act. But you know what? You have the right to do whatever you want. I don't think, I think all the disgusting things you want to do, you should be allowed to do them as long as they don't violate someone else's rights or break the law. As long as it's within the confines of the law, you're okay, and that's an expression.
Well, and to you, it may be disgusting, and to the person who's, who's expressing their freedom, it might ultimately be beautiful.
Well, no, I think the act of making a political statement is a beautiful act, no matter what it is. But I think the act of burning a flag to try and, I don't know, like, there are better ways to advocate for political change, and I think education and arguing your case is the best way to advocate for political change. This is why my idea is better than yours, not I hate America, I'm going to burn the flag, now change your mind. I don't think it helps. I don't think it's an intelligent way to debate,
Yeah, I can certainly agree with that. I don't think it helps the argument. I mean, certainly, and that might just be ultimately the finickiness of the American public that we can't find anything profound and be moved by it. But ultimately, yeah, I think that you're better off coming up with a message, coming up with something that people actually want to agree with and hear, rather than just a blatant display of screw this country. They're not representing their rights or whatever.
I honestly think you're better off not even just having them agree with you, having them disagree with you is far, far more productive, because at least they have to consider their arguments. They at least have to consider their position and defend it. That's the best way to educate them, is to have them think through not only their thought process, but your thought process as well, to try and understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, I know, and I mean, and I guess coming back to the point about mass surveillance, the issue why this is important, the issue why this is all tied together, is if, say, Trump were to actually be serious about finding people who are burning flags, his path to do that would be a lot easier with this sort of mass sort of reach of power that the government has. So that's ultimately another point too. Whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, you don't want one party to be able to do this, because then when the other party inevitably takes power, they'll be able to do it as well. And ultimately, we live in a civilized society now. But what if all of a sudden Trump decides that we're going to track down every pothead in the United States because it's illegal and start arresting people? And he would have the means to do it. And that's why these things need to be nipped in the bud and taken care of before we have a massive state where all of a sudden, people are wearing gold stars and people are afraid for their lives. I mean, that's obviously what we want to prevent here. So,
And as a proud libertarian, I would defend the rights of individuals to smoke pot where the state's allowed, even though it is against federal law. But it's, it's one of those things that I know it's the law, but I want to advocate for changing that law because drug use is a personal choice that in most cases does not affect other people. Obviously don't drive while you're high, even, no matter what you're impaired, don't drive under the influence of any substance for one, but people should be allowed to do with their bodies as they will. That's just how it should be. Now it's not the law yet, so I'm not going to march in the streets over it, but I'm going to definitely advocate for more free choice with what people can do with their own bodies. That's just my personal ideological position.
You would be good for the pot movement, though. Someone who's never done any drugs in their life, marching the street for people's right to be able to do drugs.
Hey man, just because one doesn't do something doesn't mean it doesn't mean that they should restrict others from doing it.
No, completely. So yeah, I mean, so that's the historical context of all of this. That's why this matters. This isn't just something where this is some abstract surveillance thing that either super liberals or super conservatives or libertarians or whatever are just bitching about. This is something that does affect people's lives. This is something that is already out of hand, could be much, much worse. So my question then for what can we do about this? Because obviously this is a pretty abstract topic. It's not like we can just pick at the NSA or refuse to use our cell phones or so what real practical move would you say we can make to actually kind of do anything about this? Is there an Edward Snowden pardoning movement? Because I know I have seen those signatures around. What are your thoughts on what our listener or listeners can do to help fight this cause?
Well, as citizens, what can we do about this? That's a hard question, because at the end of the day, all the Patriot Act and the various executive orders, they were passed by politicians. All right. And politicians, their primary focus in their job is to maintain power and get reelected. And if we're lucky, make our society better by passing laws that will help us. But that's not their primary focus, all right? We would be better off without mass surveillance, generally. I think so. I'm not seeing enough evidence that we are stopping attacks. I'm not seeing enough evidence that it's working. And it's also not helping that we are bombing brown people in the Middle East and leaving tons of civilians dead in the wake. That's not helping. It's like if we just let ISIS go nuts and kill people, guess what? Eventually people would turn against them and probably form militias and start murdering them, because eventually, if they didn't have anywhere to flee to, they'd probably be able to kill them pretty quickly, or they would join them. But I think we're sending more people to them by killing them ourselves, and it's not and they view American citizens and they say, wait a minute, you're not saying anything to your government to tell them to stop bombing the Middle East, to not stop killing civilians. You're not doing anything. So we are viewed as complicit, which is why they aren't killing politicians. They aren't bombing government buildings. They're bombing everyday citizens. Now, granted, they're also doing it because it's a far more effective terror tactic to attack normal everyday citizens. You kill a politician, it's like,
people might actually
Congress is like, what, a 10% approval rating or something?
It has a worse approval rating than Nickelback, the band.
And they're also all lawyers, and many people don't have very positive views of lawyers. So it's kind of like, oh crap, we sound like we're doing them a favor.
And quick side note, I just have to bring up the story because I just thought about it. In Canada, I forget what area of Canada, but they're doing a DUI program that if you do get arrested for a DUI, they drive you to the police station and they blast Nickelback in the back of the car, so you have to be forced to listen to that atrocious music for like 30 minutes in your shame.
That is the second craziest thing that's come out of Canada this past month. Have you heard the other crazy thing that's come out of Canada this month?
No, I haven't. What other crazy thing has come out of Canada?
So, with the death of Fidel Castro, long may he reign in hell. Not that I believe hell exists, just good riddance. He's gone. The Cuban people can move on, and hopefully the victims of his reign of terror will be able to take some solace in knowing there will be no future victims of Fidel, but just his brother. But have you seen the side-by-side images of Fidel Castro and Justin Trudeau?
Oh, yeah. No, it's pretty funny. Yeah, I've seen that.
And the comments from Justin Trudeau's mother, and it's like, is Justin Trudeau Fidel Castro's bastard son? Is Justin Trudeau the Ramsay Bolton of our world?
No, depending on your opinions of Trudeau.
Well, Trudeau.
Yeah, I think Trudeau's gonna defend us from the White Walkers. I don't think he's gonna.
Gosh, Trudeau. Oh my gosh, Trudeau. Every time I hear him speak, he's got that horrible lisp. He's like, well, we need a half female cabinet. Why? Because it's 2015, and this is the Canada that it's just I can't stand listening to him. He's just like, if all of the most progressive awful parts of our society built a candidate, Justin Trudeau is who they would build. He's just this ultimate like super beta male nice guy with heavy quotation marks guy, and it's just like I assume he's attractive. That's what the ladies of Canada definitely.
Oh no, he is. Yeah, he's definitely attractive.
Yeah. He's like the ideal male protagonist for the far left movement, and that and also the former Canadian Prime Minister was super unpopular because I don't know enough about Canadian. I don't care enough about Canadian politics to go into that election that Trudeau won. But it was Rob Ford won California.
No, I think Justin Trudeau is the Gavin Newsom of the North.
Oh gosh, don't Gavin Newsom. Did you hear Gavin Newsom on Adam Carolla?
No, I haven't heard him recently. I generally agree with things that he says.
Well, that's a very interesting discussion. I highly recommend to you and our viewers because Adam Carolla, I think, roasts him quite well.
Adam Carolla he's an interesting person. I hear him all the time. One thing actually I wanted to do that we didn't do.
Let's get back on track though. We've taken this Canadian rail off the rails a bit.
Oh, it's fine. I think we've touched on this subject. Let's just do like closing statements, and then I want to do one thing that we didn't
closing statement. I actually being that I assume you voted for Hillary Clinton as you
proudly, yes, should have been our first female president, but whatever.
No, dude, that'd be horrible to impeach our first female president. I want our daughters to have someone they can look up to, not someone who defended a sexual predator in various. We're not going to get into how bad.
I'm just going to say it's going to be fun impeaching our first orange president.
Well, we'll see what he does. But here's my question for you, as a Clinton supporter. What did you think of Julian Assange's conduct during the election? Do you think it was? What do you think? And do you think?
Well, I'm not the type that's like going to be a party hack that says, "Oh, why did you do that?" I just think it is ironic because he did say that Trump would be the most, disastrous thing basically for the world, and yet then proceeded to do what was morally correct and leak the documents you have, and which ultimately led to Hillary losing. I don't really actually think that it had anything to do with her losing, and that's I guess why I don't actually despise Julian Assange now, and ultimately too, journalism shouldn't be worried about the political ramifications of reporting things.
Yes.
Ultimately, that's what's wrong with a lot of our society today is that the agenda of the news isn't necessarily truth. So that's really my thoughts on that. Is that to be a liberal, we have to be aware that we have to hear the truth, regardless of whether it supports our side or our political agenda or whatever.
Yeah, whether it suits your bias or not. I think regardless of if they had released horrible things about Trump, I would have been
Well, there's plenty of
things,
horrible things released.
Glad I heard them.
Well, it just depends on what ultimately the election came down to what the American people actually cared about, and I don't really actually think they cared about either leak. I think that I feel like Trump was going to win since the convention, and it was just kind of a lot of this was just theater that kind of deluded us from the inevitable Trump actually winning because Hillary was ultimately a weak candidate who didn't campaign hard enough in the areas she actually needed to. So.
Well, I believe her whole campaign was aimed at the coastal cities and the liberal strongholds.
We're going to vote for her anyways.
Yeah, exactly. The Democrat Party turned itself into an urban party while completely ignoring, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. Hell, there was a pretty narrow margin this year in Minnesota. I mean, it wasn't like within striking distance, but New Hampshire was in striking distance. Why was New Hampshire in striking distance? 3,000 votes.
Yeah, no, because discussing it amongst my Democratic friends, we were saying, oh, how many states is she going to win? Like, how much of a landslide is this going to be? I mean, clearly we were just, you were blindsided by a lot of things. But I mean, just going back to Julian Assange, though, I mean, obviously, I think he conducted himself. He's always conducted himself very, very professionally, very, very astutely. I don't have anything negative to say about him. I think it sucks that he's been living in an embassy for 5 years, and that in itself is crazy that he continues to do what he's doing, despite the fact that he just lives in an embassy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know.
For me, it's like I view him not as a hero because he got Trump elected, just because, what is a hero but someone who will stand up in the face of, I mean, overwhelming power in the world and speak truth to it. I mean, literally, he spoke truth to Russia. He spoke truth to America. He spoke truth to all these countries.
Yeah.
Telling the truth about them and helping these leakers, keeping these leakers from, being possibly murdered. Seth Rich is a name that comes up, but it's, you protect these people, and basically he's aggregated all of this heat that normally would have gone on the people risking their lives to get these leaks out, and he's taking it all himself. And I don't think he survives the decade, unfortunately. Well,
that's a pretty morbid thought, but I mean, I can't necessarily disagree with you.
I want him to. I want him to gain. I want him to have asylum in the U.S. I want him to be kept safe. Because he does such a noble service.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately we have a real, and this can all tie in the sort of mass surveillance and journalism in general. We have a society now where whistleblowing and real journalism is really being snuffed out by whether it's governments or media interests or. Yeah, or any. I wouldn't say that, but yeah, basically, but yeah, like certainly, lots of different factors that are really contributing to our really knocking down in ignorance as a society.
Well, ignorance, I won't argue against that point. Yes, we become more ignorant, but I would actually argue that there's another kind of more mass surveillance that's a bit less. That's, I think, a bit less sinister, and it's not the mass surveillance done by the government, it's the mass surveillance being done by us. It's that everyone's got a computer and a camera in their pocket. Everyone has a computer and a video camera in their pocket that can upload files to the internet at a moment's notice and can, see the truth, just like on 9/11 with Hillary Clinton. No one bothered to report that the possible president candidate may have had a seizure, stroke, or who knows what it was. But fortunately, someone with a camera caught them doing that. And then 4 years before that, Mitt Romney had a private function saying he was right, granted, that more than almost half the country doesn't pay any taxes and will never vote for us. Yes, he's right, but you don't say that. It's just like you don't call half the population deplorable and irredeemable, which is essentially what Mitt Romney did in 2012. And Mitt Romney lost for many other reasons, but that was a big part of it. And that kind of citizen journalism that was performed is very important. And it's this is why, unfortunately, I don't believe a lot of the hate crimes accusations. It's like, wait, you have this horrible thing happening, no one pulled out a camera, really? And that's why a lot of people, when they're brought into the police, they say, wait a minute, you mean I'll be charged if this turns out to be a hoax? Yes. And they're like, oh, nope, sorry, I didn't do it. That's why, if something bad's happening, take out your camera, or better yet, stop what's happening. Get involved. If you see something going on that's wrong and, you have the capacity, obviously don't pull out your fists when someone's pointing a gun at someone, be reasonable. But, record things when bad things are happening and help when you have the capacity to help.
And maybe in total, we might actually be a better society. And maybe then we won't have to spy on each other at this mass surveillance.
Maybe then our federal government will not have to spy on us. Exactly.
Well, I think that's a pretty good way to sum it. What I want to do that we didn't do in our last thing, and I think we should do this for the next couple sort of podcasts, just until we start getting a little bit more of an audience base, is I think we should just both take a moment and kind of discuss what we get our sources from, just so that people can kind of understand, and also give people an idea if they want to look it on their own. I remember for myself, when I was trying to get into real liberal politics, I really had to be shown and told, kind of what to listen to. Like, I would never have discovered certain things without people telling me about it. So I think if we just take a moment and do that, I think it would be really useful, considering obviously both of us listen to very different sources. So, so I guess I'll start. So main things I listen to Democracy Now! Every morning. That's I think a great news source. They have an hour podcast that you can get. They're a great source if you're really interested in kind of learning about a lot of humanitarian and sort of things related to climate change, things related to things that you really just don't hear on the mainstream media. You don't hear them talk about. Now, granted, I will give you that the program itself can get kind of boring and long at times. I always make sure I listen to the 15 minutes in the beginning because that is definitely the headlines. And there are a lot of headlines that you really won't hear anywhere else. Other things I listen to the Young Turks every once in a while. I listen to the Majority Report. And then I listen to a podcast called Best of the Left, which really does take a lot of different podcasts and kind of combine them. On the lighter side, I listen to a lot of Bill Simmons' network, the ringer.com, a lot of those kind of podcasts. The Keeping It 1600 is a pretty good kind of middle of the row, leaning left podcast that kind of talks about politics. So I listen to that every once in a while, as well as a bunch of different sports shows. My favorite of all podcasts is the Dan Le Batard Show, because he's just awesome, and Stu Gatz is the funniest thing ever to be on radio. So that's what I pretty much, my source is. I do read the New York Times, as much as I know you hate that ghost. And yeah, so I think that's pretty much the gist of where I get my sources from.
Okay, so I generally listen to a bit more right-leaning sources as well, but if I need to feel enraged, I'll watch some MSNBC and watch a bunch of human waste of space and try to justify their political opinion. But
except for Maddow. Maddow's great.
I always thought Rachel Maddow looked like you. Looks just like you, Nick. I think I think she's going for the Nick look. But
I'm going for the Rachel Maddow look.
It's the other way around. But I listen to a lot of NPR when it's funny when ESPN goes to turns into MSNBC with footballs. I'll generally will listen to NPR as the voice of reason, and I listen to NPR during commercials, and I like some of what they have to say. I just think they're very biased. Aside from that, I will read Breitbart. I read Breitbart every day, and yeah, I read the fake news over on Breitbart as the official news. The official news, Stasi says, is the fake news there.
Well, there's some fake on there. Let's not completely throw that off. But
I think that there's just questionable news sometimes. I think they're actually pretty good at vetting their sources. I get a lot of news actually from the Donald Trump subreddit, which is, we know, there's the Dom Reddit. But there's a lot of fun stuff that goes up there. It's always fun to hear about like craziness going on with liberals. As far as YouTube, I listen to a lot of different YouTubers. I highly recommend the Rubin Report with Dave Rubin, a former member of the Young Turks. He interviews people from all sides of the political spectrum. He talks to all kinds of people within science, politics, and all these different subjects. And I think he has fascinating interviews. Aside from him, I listen to a couple alt-right figures. Stefan Molyneux, I think he does a lot of interesting work talking about immigration and minarchism to anarchism. I think he has a lot of interesting perspectives on these topics, and he talks a lot about current events. Also within the alt-right, I listen to a little bit to Paul Joseph Watson. I'm not a big fan of InfoWars because I think they're really shilly, but I think Paul Joseph Watson is a really good speaker. He's a bit less out there than Alex Jones. Aside from Paul Joseph Watson, I like Sargon of Akkad. He's a British, I guess, liberal, but kind of more libertarian. He's kind of a libertarian-leaning liberal, but he is a leftist, and he talks with a lot of different political figures. If you watch Sargon's channel, you'll find a lot of the other kind of good center-left, center-right YouTubers that he'll have discussions with a lot of them. And I think he does a really good weekly show, This Week in Stupid, where he goes over like dumb news stories, usually in America, because a lot of the craziness comes from America, unfortunately. But yeah, those are most of my sources. I'll pick up a newspaper once in a while, but I'll usually just use it to, wash something or something. Yeah, but those are generally what my sources I listen to.
Shout out to the Ventura County Star, the Ventura County's local newspaper. Just saying, not terrible.
I will not give a shout out to my local newspapers.
Yeah, there's nothing.
Nothing much to write home about. So do you want to transition to sports and geek culture in general?
Yeah. So I guess we can talk a little bit about this weekend. Trying to think.
Jeff Fisher. Have you heard about the Jeff Fisher controversy?
Oh yes, the Jeff Fisher fire him now controversy.
Please fire Jeff Fisher. Fisher. I'm not even a Rams fan, but
Does he have
seriously.
does he have to lose again to be fired? Because I feel like they should just fire him right now, and then their team might actually win a game.
Like if what and let's just be clear. If what Eric Dickerson is saying is true, that Jeff Fisher told him he was not welcome on the Rams sidelines, I don't think Jeff Fisher has the wherewithal to lead a football team, let alone like a what do you call it? I don't think he could lead an AA meeting, let alone a football team. If his thought is, hey, I'm going to take the most popular LA Ram and I'm going to tell him you can't come to the sidelines of our games at our shitty stadium. Like,
yeah, it isn't even our stadium yet. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like what?
Yeah, there is no more like it's between him and Kurt Warner is the most memorable Ram, or like Marshall Faulk. But I mean, really, it's got to be Eric Dickerson. I mean, if you had to pick one Ram, LA Ram specifically player too, that's most memorable. Yeah, it's completely absurd. How can he not realize that this was going to blow up in his face?
If he had done the same thing to Kurt Warner or Marshall Faulk, it would still be just as stupid.
Now, if he was 9-2, I feel like people would be thinking differently of this than if he was,
If he was 9-2, I don't think Eric Dickerson would have gone public with that statement. I think he'd be going. I don't think he would have been criticizing the team, and I don't think Jeff Fisher may or may not have said to him that you aren't welcome on the sidelines. I think he would have been singing his praises from the rooftops. But
I mean, they're just atrocious. I mean, the games that they score more than like 15 points, they get blown out in because the other team decides that to score 40 on them. And then the games that they keep it close and can't score a touchdown, they've only won like a few of those. So I mean, they're just probably the most boring team other than maybe the 49ers to watch on TV right now. And even the Niners are kind of exciting because you want to see how many people throw shit at Colin Kaepernick throughout the course of the game. So
I just want to watch that Kiko Alonso, the son of a Cuban immigrant, sacking Colin Kaepernick to win. Well, I mean, it was Cameron Wake, but he got to go be part of that tackle and stop him after he wore that Castro shirt, and then subsequently apologized, which is weird for me. Like, wait, of all the things Kaepernick apologizes for, this is it.
I guess I to kind of go to the Kaepernick thing. Last time we talked, I had said that screw Kaepernick, he didn't vote. I've taken a little bit more time to think about that, and while I am still very upset at the fact that he didn't vote. Ultimately, I think that his positions and the things that he's taking, I mean, he sounds a lot smarter than we would generally expect to hear from jockey football quarterbacks. I mean, what he basically said
I think quarterbacks are generally the smartest players on the field, besides maybe like a middle linebacker defensive captain who's like a transcendent talent. I think the quarterback's supposed to.
I guess, yeah. I don't mean to sort of be negative about it. I mean, as smart as in they understand political issues and can actually, when they speak on something, what they're saying is actually valid and not just a soundbite of craziness. I mean, because basically what he said with the voting is there's the lesser two evils, and I don't want to vote for evil. So, like, okay, I'll give you a pass on that. That seems like a fair enough argument. You're not going to vote for either candidate. At least you didn't just, vote for Hillary just to be, a hack or whatever.
He did say he was corrupt. And I was like, well, he doesn't say, even a broken clock is right twice a day, So I'm like, oh, okay, fine. You said something true.
Yeah, I mean, and granted, what because again, I listen to Levitard's show a lot. They were discussing the Kaepernick thing, and Levitard's opinion of it was pretty sound, I would say. Basically, he was saying that Kaepernick wasn't really necessarily praising Castro as a person. He was just very nearsighted in saying things like, oh, the literacy rate, because the literacy rate in Cuba is very high. But
wait. I just want to interrupt you for a moment. Okay, who reports the Cuban literacy rate?
Well,
let's be honest here. Okay, who's reporting the Cuban literacy rate? Now, if you want to show that you're communist or socialist or whatever it is, government is working, are you going to say, no, man, our literacy rates are crashing, our healthcare is getting worse? Are you really going to admit that to the world? Or when you have no free press, are you just going to lie and say, no, everything's great here, Cuba is a paradise? Are you really you're going to believe that statistic?
Oh, fair enough. Okay, well, cynicism aside, that is generally a conception that is held about Cuba. So all he's doing is speaking to that. He's saying that he agrees with the socialist aspects of it. He's just making that sort of a stance, which I think if you asked 9 out of 10 NFL players, they wouldn't even be able to articulate that. What I'm saying is simply that I'm not as much negative on Kaepernick now. I think that what he's doing is courageous. He may be stupid, it may be misinformed, but it is courageous, and he does have a pair of them for standing up for what he believes. And like I've told you before, I admire the hell out of Tim Tebow. Tim Tebow, to me, even though I don't agree with anything that he believes in, is somebody who really stands for what he believes, and to me, that's something that I can admire to a certain extent. So I will maybe be buying a Kaepernick jersey.
Well, sorry. Well, I mean, for me, like with Kaepernick, it's like, yes, it is brave to make a political statement in a world that's in a type of world that's supposed to be apolitical, sports, where it's supposed to be everyone, the Republicans put their elephant hat down, the Democrats put their donkey hat down, they put on their football jerseys, and they all will cheer for whoever their team is, and they get together, they'll drink beer together, and they'll not talk about politics for about 3 hours of football. Yes, yeah, it is an interesting choice to bring politics into that arena. I don't necessarily agree with it. But if you try to say, oh, Castro did all these good things, I mean, like, would you say the same thing about like Mao? Like, oh, look, Mao brought all these Chinese people into the modern era, but or Stalin. Look, Stalin brought the Soviet Union to the height of its power before it collapsed in upon itself. Yeah, he had gulags and death camps everywhere. Like, just. Like, for me, there's still a lot of living victims of these dictators, and now I'm never one to care about people's feelings, but it's just like, really, you're gonna praise this guy after all the baggage.
While you're playing Miami, of course, yeah.
Yes, Miami, we're the Cuban stronghold of America.
Well, yeah, and to be fair, I mean, that was what Levitard's point was basically. Like, you don't ever talk about the bridges that Hitler built. Like, nobody cares. And nobody cares if they had a strong infrastructure when he was in charge. Like, that's not the point. So ultimately, that was his error. I mean, Kaepernick wasn't wrong because he spoke out. Kaepernick was wrong because he was taking a stance that seems like something from someone on Twitter who doesn't really understand the magnitude of what this world leader specifically has done. He's obviously a monster of a person, whether you agree with his political leanings. You can't be okay with the amount of people that he's killed, the amount of famine, and the amount of sort of just overall horribleness that is basically set Cuba back to the 1950s as far as their world is concerned.
A lot of classic cars, but also Fidel is evil not just because of what he did to his own people. I mean, he basically single-handedly he made the Cuban Missile Crisis happen. I mean, Khrushchev wanted secretly to put missiles on Cuba, and Castro was like, no. I want to. He was willing to risk world nuclear annihilation in order to, like, I guess, lobby for power. He made the Russians and the Americans look like sane adults in the room while they were both threatening nuclear annihilation to each other by being more insane than both of them. Yeah, no, it's and there is, while there are certain other revolutions that happened in Central and South America that you can say were influenced by the Cuban Revolution. And while ultimately I do agree with socialism as a form of government, and that's what I advocate for. Yeah, as we've said, how's Venezuela doing?
Well, we can touch on the topic of all of that.
Socialism is a whole topic later. Just
yes, but basically, yeah, nobody gives a shit about how many bridges Hitler built. So Kaepernick, that was not the time. You would, if you want to be a political activist, it probably would help if you got off the Niners and just got off the Niners because nobody wants to be on that team. And
the Wikipedia page before you praise someone.
Yeah, no, it's
I'm not asking.
Praising murderers is generally not a good sign, especially when you're playing against the city where most of the victims are. So
yes. That'd be like praising the Viet Cong in, like Westminster or like heavily Vietnamese parts of Southern California, go like, oh, praise the Viet Cong, those people we helped you, that America helped you flee from. Yeah, those were great people in the revolution they brought forth.
Talking about nuclear energy and like nuclear bombs in Okinawa, like about how great it is that we have nukes in Okinawa. Yeah, it's not
maybe not the right place for it. I mean, he has a First Amendment right. He has the right to make any political statement he wants. He also has the right to.
And I hope he continues. I hope he keeps kneeling. I hope that people on Fox News and around the country keep posting on Twitter about how much they hate him, and I just hope it continues. It's great. It's great. And I think it is also hurting the league ratings, which is also great. So, as much as I love the NFL, I do hate it. So.
I think interesting enough, he's taken Mike Pence's tweet to heart. You know, Mike Pence said that every American should spend a couple hours on their knees every day. And maybe Cameron took it literally.
Yeah, well, at least he's not spending 3 hours on the bench anymore. So,
well, Pence said that as prayer, as like, you know, should be praying, you know, as a staunch in any form of spirituality or God. It's like, I found it silly, but, you know, of course, my friends over on the Donald Trump Reddit said the moment Mike Pence won the LGBT vote, which I thought was hilarious. But
that's funny.
I know. See, this is why you lost. You lost the meme war. You were not paying attention. They have 315,000 subscribers there. There's 10,000 people active on a one presidential campaign's Reddit right now. It's insane.
Yeah, I mean, that is true. I mean, did ultimately we underestimate? Because I would just always assume people on Twitter and just didn't vote. Like, there were a number of people who probably even tweeted that they voted for Trump and didn't actually show up. And I think actually all those people actually showed up.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting enough. What was it I was doing? I was reading an article on Breitbart. I'm just going to preface it by saying this, but I think they were checking the official statistics, and Trump had a 16% swing in millennial voters. He lost millennial voters 54 to 36, but that was 16 points better than Mitt Romney did. So young Cubans and young Republicans won Florida because that was more Republicans than the margin of victory was in Florida.
Yeah. No, there's still so many things to digest about all of this. But you can also hear more of our thoughts on that by listening to our other election podcasts that we do have.
I'm not going to get too much into the election. I feel we've addressed that well, and we will come back. We may come back to it later, but you know, we've already addressed that.
And we will certainly discuss President Trump.
The God Emperor himself.
Hopefully for his only limited 2 years that he's in power. No, I'm just kidding.
He'll be there for 8, I think.
Well,
unless the Democrats throw a Hail Mary, but it's not looking that way. I mean, Howard Dean doesn't even want to support
a Hail Warren. That's what it's called. It's a Hail Warren.
Oh gosh. Howard Dean doesn't even want to support that anti-Semite you're trying to elect as the chair of the DNC.
Well, yeah, the DNC is its own. I'm working on my article still that I'll be posting, analyzing the DNC and their moves going forward. So stay posted for that. Also, a few other housekeeping things. We do have a few. We have one new article written by Ghost Politics on our site discussing why Trump won. It's a very poignant piece, kind of attacking the bigotry and sort of the double-sided arguments that existed, I think, on the left. While I don't agree with everything that you said on that, I think that you do bring up some valid points. And while it might not be, I don't think necessarily as much that it's factually true, I think in the hearts of a lot of Americans, they do feel like Trump was their champion and that Hillary wasn't. So, and I think they were tired. And I think they were ultimately tired of being told that they were, bigots and racist and all of that, simply because they had made that decision. But yeah, so.
There's an interesting thing, my job was financial analysis mainly. I was primarily a financial analyst. You understand that there's actually something true about financial analysis and the real world, is that like a stock's price or the value of a company is not based on what numbers you just produced. Like if Apple makes 10 million in profit, the stock price is no longer based off that 10 million in profit being made. It's based off what are the expectations for that company in the future. Mm-hmm. And the expectations were that a Hillary Clinton presidency would be 4 more years of Barack Obama. The expectations of Donald Trump was it will not be 4 more years of Barack Obama. It will be something else. And maybe we might have more manufacturing jobs. Speaking of which, Carrier, keeping jobs. Very expensive deal, I'm assuming, probably. But those jobs are going to be here. And they're not going to care how many tax breaks Carrier gets or what benefits they get for what tariffs they don't get. They don't care about that. There's 1,100 people or so who know, hey, I might still have my job. I will still have my job for another year. Then that resonates with them. It's like, yeah, we know it's going to be costly, but they'd rather be working than taking a welfare check. And a lot of people think that way. Fortunately for us.
Yeah, and those people found their champion, and we'll see what happens. We'll see how he performs. So, do you want to talk about Final Fantasy 15 at all, or do you want to say that for next time?
Oh no, now that I have completed the story, yes, I could guess I could give an impromptu review of the newest entry in the long running RPG series. So it's just I mean they just start. The game looks fantastic. And normally when you say something like this, it means you're going to give a bad review. Fortunately, no, it's also fun to play. It's an interesting combination of it's kind of think Kingdom Hearts is the combat style, like this active jumping around. Think Kingdom Hearts, but even better. It's like Kingdom Hearts, but faster paced, and the whole combat is based off like complex parrying and teleporting, and it's a lot of fun. Magic is interesting. The way magic works is interesting. The way I don't know how I feel about the summons. They're kind of like this Deus Ex Machina that you can win boss battles with when you're in trouble. But that's the game plays really fun. There's a boss fight at the midpoint of the game that I felt like Goku from Dragon Ball Z fighting fighting like a super boss. And it was fantastic. You're flying around this destroyed city fighting a giant serpent, and it is fantastic.
Oh, little Leviathan, the Leviathan fight.
Yes. Oh my god.
Yeah, looks great.
That fight is absolutely fantastic. All of it's interesting. Like what the car. A lot of people say, "Oh, it's Grand Theft Auto." No, it's not. You're not running people over with a car. You just use the car as your method of transport, and they have all the albums of previous Final Fantasy games. You can do what most Final Fantasy fans do, which is listen to old Final Fantasy music while they're driving around. Now, so the game it plays really well. The core game mechanics are a lot of fun. Now, the story itself, think like a Shakespearean tragedy, or if you're more weeb like I am, it's kind of think a visual novel, like it's the bad ending the entire time, like everything that can go wrong does go wrong. And it's interesting because, like people, they're scarred permanently, they're permanently changed, and and there's some stuff that's not really executed, and it might have just been lost in translation. There's one of the characters' arcs in the game is kind of like, it was kind of rushed, and it was just kind of out of left field. There wasn't a good build to it. It's like, it's a big twist about this character, but because there was no build, it was like, whatever. And there's a lot of they tried to reenact a lot of older moments from the classic games, especially from my favorite game, Final Fantasy VI. And the villain is kind of I won't spoil who the villain is because that'd be a big spoiler. But he reminds me of one of my favorite villains. Now, as for the ending's fine. Kind of very depressing, I guess, or depending on your interpretation, it's pretty depressing. Overall, though, definitely worth the 25 hours I pumped in these last 3 days.
Yeah, I can't believe you got it done in 25 hours. I was reading that the story is like 60 to 80. Did you, is it easy, or is it something where you just were, killing it?
Oh, it's easy. I was playing on normal difficulty. Well, okay, yes, it is easy. If you have enough healing. It's unfortunately it has the same thing that the games like Diablo 2 had, where basically you can win any fight by spamming healing items, and basically it just becomes like.
So is that one of those where you can pause the game and heal yourself?
Yes. Unfortunately, yeah, the healing. What happens is you open up like a tactical menu where you can either summon a chocobo, throw a Moogle as like a taunt, or you can use healing items, and you can use them on your whole party at any time. And I think they could have done it more difficultly, but I was just happy that it didn't break the flow of the game. It's really hard to game over. You have to really fuck up to game over, unfortunately.
Fair enough. Yeah, because I'm playing through Final Fantasy IX or IX, the one with the Black Mage and
Vivi, Zidane, Garden.
Zidane, yeah.
Oh,
and God, I need to grind 5 levels just to beat this one boss that I'm just stuck on.
So actually, there's an interesting thing about FF15 is that I didn't have to grind. Basically the final area, not the final dungeon, basically had a bunch of monsters that I had no chance of killing. So I just kind of was like, gonna avoid you. And then I'd go fight monsters I could fight. And then I would get to the final epic boss fight, and then another final epic boss fight. And then of course there's a cooldown fight. But that's all irrelevant. People, if they want to play it, they'll get to it.
That's pretty much how every Final Fantasy is, though.
Yeah, exactly. It ends the same way every Final Fantasy ends. You fight 5 boss fights, and then there's a bigger boss fight, and then you get to spike the football.
Yeah.
But yes, very good. I enjoyed it a lot. So because I've been playing 25 hours of Final Fantasy, I have not had a chance to play that much of the latest entry in Pokemon. So why don't you tell us what you thought of the latest Pokemon entry?
All right. Well, I'm still not done with it because I have been grinding excessively. I will report that I can brag. I already have over 100 Pokemon, and I've nearly gotten done with finishing things. I
Place
really
on the
like it.
playground.
Yeah, it's I chose the grass starter, who is super badass when it hits its final form. Overall, I'm very impressed with the game. I think that I think that what they do best is listening to fans, and I think that they've done a really good job of kind of getting rid of a lot of the terrible things of the game. I will say that the game is incredibly easy with experience share. I pretty much have just been using my starter, regardless of whether or not it's super effective or it's strategic or anything. I've basically just been spamming Razor Leaf and leveling up everybody else in my party with experience share. My starter is already at level 47, so I am pretty much just blowing through the game. But it is still fun. I look forward to finishing the Pokédex and hopefully battling competitively online a little bit. But all in all, very much worth the wait. I'm very, very
Not
pleased
10
with it.
years worth the wait, but definitely worth the wait.
Yes, and the sort of the conspiracy theories about the connections between the games, like this might be the true sequel to Gold and Silver. That this might be the last one, not necessarily the last Pokemon,
Yeah.
the last one as far as the story's concerned. Is kind of interesting. I do like that they have a little bit more of a story. It doesn't really feel as cookie cutter, because now you're just traveling to the islands. But honestly, Pokemon with like dialogue and story is kind of pointless. I don't need I don't need to talk to this guy with a shirt on and about like how he wants to form a Pokemon League and this you to be the first ever champion and all this kind of stuff. Like none of that really matters. Like all I really need to know is that I'm going to the city and catching these things and getting badges. So while I do appreciate that they are going out of their way to make new content and to make a new story, ultimately I'm just pretty much spamming through the dialogue to get back to the point where I can go catch more and battle more. So yeah, I would rate it very highly. I really still just want a console one. Please just make a console Pokemon game, would just be fantastic.
Exteriors of the Darkness.
Yes, something great, something bigly.
Bigly. Huge. We need a huge Pokemon game on the Switch. Oh my gosh. If they put it on the Switch, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, there are rumors that they're going to do like the Pokemon Moon, Sun and Moon compatible, like the whatever.
No. Design it for a console from the ground up. You know why they won't do this, right? Because then they'll have to have 3D models of all the Pokemon with all the different. It'd be an insane undertaking. Like it'd be just.
Oh yeah, I know. Something that they can just keep releasing it with the same engines on.
It would be an insane undertaking for them, unfortunately. I'd play Pokemon if it had a combat system like Final Fantasy 15. That'd be a blast.
Oh, it'd be so great. I'd be so happy. So those are my basic thoughts on that. Do you have anything else you want to talk about?
No, I guess that's our geek culture corner. But I think we can go transition back to the sports side of Diploma Sports.
Yes. So very looking forward to this weekend. Both of our teams playing very crucial games. Dolphins are going to have a tall order beating the Ravens in Baltimore. But if they do, with Gronk out, their chances of making the playoffs, their chances of maybe even winning the division at this point are very much there. But it is pretty much a must-win for the Dolphins this weekend.
Every game is a must-win this season, unfortunately, and that's because Kenny Stills had to drop a pass, and they would have caught for a touchdown, and we would have beaten the Seahawks. Oh, and there's a couple games we should have taken that we lost. I think the Jags game is a perfect example.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a perfect example.
We managed to lose quite a few games, and but they've won 6 in a row, so they're actually on a tear. They're not Cowboys on a tear, but
Cowboys should have lost last night too. They had that. There was plenty of reasons for them to lose that game last night, and they just the Vikings just showed that they're incapable of doing anything other than slanting to the right or anything of that nature.
Yeah, no, how many games have they lost lately?
The Vikings? I think the Vikings have lost 6 of 7, I would say.
Oh wow, yeah, they're 6-6 now after that great start.
I think they started 5-0.
Yeah, they're doing awful.
Yeah, and then my team
plays the division from the Lions. That's how bad it is.
The Lions might win that division. Well, it might come to now the Packers. All of a sudden, the Packers decided, oh hey, we're playing the Eagles, so of course we're gonna finally look good again. That offense looked very unstoppable, despite the fact that they don't have a running game. Aaron Rodgers looked to be back to his old form. They host the Texans this week in a game that I expect them to win. So you'll be looking at that Week 17 matchup between the Packers and the Lions as a possible.
That could be a playoff. That would very likely have playoff implications because the Lions are playing. Are they on a bye this week? No, they're playing.
The Lions are playing. Who are the? No, the Lions are playing the Saints this week.
This is a very winnable game for the Lions, but they could easily throw it away because the Saints are kind of that team. It's like when you face the Saints, you've got it's almost like a 3-bullet Russian roulette. You're gonna pull the trigger and you got a 50-50 chance of getting a bullet in your brain. Like, well, is Drew Brees gonna throw 5 touchdowns, or is the offense gonna stall, or is Mark Ingram and Tim Hightower, are they gonna rush for like 3 touchdowns for some reason no one can explain?
They're gonna get the extra point blocked and run back for
exactly.
The game.
They're a very streaky team.
God, Saints should have had that game.
Yes, I would have loved that because then the Broncos would be tied with the Dolphins right now.
Yeah, and I would have won money on that too. Freaking Saints.
They almost would have if they had tied the Broncos and the Chiefs. That would have been a very interesting case if the Dolphins helped the Dolphins more to have them both be worse off.
Yeah, what do you think about the whole kicking the 62-yard field goal? That's really the thing that's caught most people's attention over the.
Were they in Denver?
The what?
Were they in Denver?
Yes, it was in Denver.
See, that adds some gray to the situation. Like, well, you could. I mean, it was for the win. On the other hand, your defense has played probably 40 to 50 minutes of football, and they're very tired. And you don't necessarily want your winded defense to give what they need, like 40 yards of field. I mean, they kicked a field goal they barely made. That was barely. But no,
yeah.
I think you punt. Well, it's hard because if you punt it, you're saying we're not going to win this game, right?
Yeah, you're playing for the tie then, essentially.
You're playing for the tie, which is only. I mean, how good is a tie? Not. I mean.
Well, they'd be in the playoffs right now, and the Dolphins would be out if they had ended in a tie. Instead, now they got the loss.
Yeah. No. Yeah, actually, sorry, they are tied with the Dolphins. Shit. Good job. Fins up.
Yeah, well, my thought on this is if you're gonna kick that field goal, why? Because if you look at the play calls in first, second, and third down, it's almost like he was just kind of deciding as he went. I mean, if you knew you were going to take a long field goal, wouldn't you try to at least get like 5 yards out of that? So it's a 57-yarder, and then it's much more reasonable, much more makeable. I'm not necessarily opposed to the whole kicking it in the first place, but it does seem kind of absurd that.
No, their kicker is it Prater still or who?
It's McManus. Prater is the Lions kicker.
Yeah, you're right. McManus, though, he doesn't – I don't know what his leg strength is, really, unfortunately.
Well, he got hit at 57. I think he's hit at 57 or 58-yarder before. But either way, I mean, the whole point is why wouldn't you just run the ball 3 times? At least then force Kansas City to either use their timeouts or drain more clock as well. And then go from there.
I mean, Kansas City, I think they were stuffing the run quite well as well.
Yeah, I mean, and that might have happened as well, too. But then, I don't know. It seems like if you're going to decide to do something, then you gotta, then you should have your strategy do that. You shouldn't just change your mind about your strategy 3 different times in the same drive.
And also, I mean, if you do that, you can run the clock down to 3 seconds, kick the field goal with no time left, so that it's either you win or it's a tie, rather than give them, short field with the ball.
Yeah, and it is pretty impressive. I mean, I wouldn't have guessed that Alex Smith would have been able to go down the field that quickly anyways. I assumed that game was going to go to a tie, which is fine because I had Kansas City +3. So for me, Kansas City losing by a field goal would have been fine as well, but I just needed them not to lose by more than a field goal.
Yeah, so you saw it either way. But no, I mean, I think the Broncos made some pretty bad play calls at the end of that game.
Yeah, and that's why they might be looking out and watching the Dolphins in January instead of us watching them. So,
well, interestingly, if the Dolphins beat the Ravens this week, they'll send the Ravens down to 6-6 and bring the Dolphins up to 8-4.
Yeah, no, if the Dolphins win this week, they just need to finish at least 10-6. Obviously, I mean,
Texans are likely going to lose. Texans are in charge of that division, so. They're at the front of that division. But the Titans are coming up a bit, but they have an extra loss and aren't. I think it's their bye this week. Yeah. Yeah, I think the Titans are on a bye this week as well.
The bye week should be over after this week, though. I think we're finally going to get to the whole 16-game slate.
Yeah. Geez, though, the Cowboys 11 straight wins.
Yeah, Cowboys Raiders. Now with the Gronk being out for possibly the season, the Raiders all of a sudden, Raiders of the Chiefs all of a sudden look like this real dark horse.
I don't think the Chiefs will go anywhere in the playoffs. I think they'll make the playoffs.
Well, yeah, but I mean, keep in mind that Denver won with a quarterback who couldn't throw more than 10 yards. So, I mean, maybe really this is the new NFL. Is these teams are all mediocre, and a team that can get hot and get some turnovers. If you look at, I heard a crazy stat today that Dallas and New England neither team has like forced a turnover in something like a month or something like that. I think last night's game might have changed that stat a little bit because I think Dallas might have gotten a turnover. But still, I mean, it's the point where anything can happen in these playoffs. I mean, it's going to be a complete, like, we could be seeing Giants. We could see the Giants in the Super Bowl again.
Oh, gosh, please no. There's such a, I mean, yeah, Odell Beckham is fun to watch, but it's just like, oh, gosh, come on. Don't give Eli Manning a third ring.
Oh, yeah, I would be okay with seeing Patriots Giants for the third time.
Oh, God. Round 3.
Round 3 without Gronk again. So that would just be great if Tom Brady's 3 Super Bowl losses are to a Manning, but it's not to Peyton Manning.
Yeah, I will have to apologize to the viewers of our first podcast. I predicted that Johnny Manziel would turn the Browns around at that point, and I am now clearly wrong as the Browns are 0-12. I stand by my decision being the right decision at the time.
I think Johnny Manziel might have actually been their last winning quarterback. Like, I think he might have gotten their last win. I could be wrong on that, but
that's pretty sad. Well, at least Pryor is fun to watch.
Yeah, they are, certainly.
You want to know a fun stat?
What? Wait, tell me.
Browns have a minus 155 point margin versus their opponents. However, they have 3 more touchdowns than the division-leading Baltimore Ravens. Well, tied for the division lead. So they've scored 22 touchdowns.
Yeah, no, I mean they've the Browns. If you look at their against the spread record, they're not actually that terrible. They generally cover. They covered, or they almost covered against the Giants. They looked like they were going to cover that game the whole way through. I mean, taking the Browns at the points it's almost like taking the Niners at the points is weirdly not a terrible bet. Granted, taking them to win is a horrible bet, but taking them with the points, which is usually anywhere from 7.5 to 8 points, is usually turns out to be a pretty good selection. Weirdly enough.
Yeah. But so many – how do they always matching the spread if there's such a huge negative margin?
Well, I mean, teams like what's the team that's really been good about – I mean, Dallas up until the last couple of weeks has been really good at over surpassing it. But, I mean, Vegas usually wins money. That's why.
The house always wins.
Yes, unless you listen to this podcast and eventually my sports picks, which I will have up.
Well, the house always wins unless
unless they don't.
If they don't, the house closes.
Well, the idea is the house always wins because even if there's one smart bettor, there's 9 people that take the Browns plus 6 and think, oh, that's great, the Browns will keep it, and then they lose by 25. So
there's always 9 suckers for every 1 winner.
Yeah, pretty much. I would say that pretty definitively.
All right, so that's American football. I think we've said our piece about that. Some interesting matchups this weekend. What do you think about our Lakers?
Well, they're 10-10 right now. I think.
Yes, they are 10-10 after an embarrassing defeat by the Pelicans. Well, granted, they were understaffed. They're missing Randall, I think. I know they're missing Russell and Nick Young, but they came back from that embarrassing defeat to beat the Bulls by 6 points. The fully staffed Chicago Bulls with Rondo, Wade, and Jimmy Butler all on the floor with just Randall back.
Yeah, it is funny. I haven't watched too many Laker games this season. I did watch their opening game against the Rockets. I haven't watched too many, but at my girlfriend's house, one of her neighbors is a very LA oriented fan, and like when the Dodgers are winning, he was cheering a lot, and so I can usually tell how the Lakers are doing just based on what I'm hearing outside the window. So it's been some cheers here and there, certainly more than last season.
Oh gosh,
Definitely
yeah.
plenty to be happy about. I still think they're a year away from being playoffs. I mean, maybe sneak in as an 8th seed, but I see them more as next year's interesting story.
I think in 2 years they're relevant in the playoffs. Like, I think they can pass the first round in 2 years if Luke Walton can keep this pace up.
Yeah, my big team that I'm taking away that I'm thoroughly surprised that they're just awful still is the Timberwolves.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. The Timberwolves, they have all the pieces they need. I think that their coaching needs to improve. I mean, it's just like,
Yeah,
how do
well,
you have
they got a
Carl?
coach that was supposed to improve that coaching, so it's very strange.
Yeah, I mean, you've got all these insane talents: Karl Anthony Towns, Andrew Wiggins, Zach LaVine is really good. You got all these guys on your team, and they're just a couple guys. And you've got Luke Walton with some really good players, but not good yet. Wiggins is good now. Karl Anthony Towns is good now. Russell Randall and Brandon Ingram should be good soon.
Uh-huh.
But their team is playing like, they're playing like they're already good players. The 10 deep mentality they're doing is just insane.
Yeah, but it'll be interesting to see. I still don't really follow I don't really follow basketball until Christmas. So maybe we'll do like a basketball preview podcast or something like after the Christmas Day games. Because that's when I really start paying attention and actually reading the numbers. And
we'll do that for whenever there's sports playoffs that we care about coming up. We'll do like a preview, and
yeah. Well, I mean, we have the college football playoffs start soon.
I will sit blank-eyed as you go over the the college football playoffs.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm currently going to be watching the Washington-Colorado game as soon as we finish here. I'm very excited for that Pac-12 championship between two unlikely people in the Pac-12.
Is that WSU or UW?
UW.
Oh.
And then there's Alabama is obviously great still. And you got Michigan and Ohio State. So there's a lot of intrigue with the college football. And then obviously I'm planning on doing a pro football article about how the Seahawks are going to ruin the Cowboys' life. But we'll see. We'll see how this all goes.
You really think the Seahawks can come into Dallas and beat them?
I don't think Dallas has much of a home field advantage. I think Dallas is obviously the better team. But
it's not a matter of home field advantage. It's just not being in Seattle where they're pumping in that noise. And
it's just partially just watching the Cowboys for the last 10 years have all that expectation. And I mean, I could see the Giants. I could see the Giants beating them in the second round. I see the Cowboys being the 1 seed that eventually loses before they get to the NFC Championship. Maybe that's just because I obviously hate the Cowboys, but that's what I see happening.
Yeah, you mean they'll be like the 116 win Seattle Mariners or like the 120 win New York Yankee? Well, no, they won. Never. No, but like
Panthers.
Huh?
The 15-1 Panthers of last year.
Or the 16-0 Patriots of a few years back.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll see. The playoffs are always interesting. I mean, Dak might be the next Ben Roethlisberger, but I don't think he's as good. But we'll see. We'll see.
Yet. I mean, he could develop even better, and it'll also depend on weapons. You got to remember, young Ben Roethlisberger. Let's talk about some of his wide receivers. You go from Hines Ward, you've got Antonio Brown, and then you had Mike Wallace. Just burning up the field. While you have Antonio Brown catching every other ball within his vicinity.
And you had Santonio Holmes when he first started. Yeah, I mean that team was stacked for a long time. Jerome Bettis.
Marcus Wheaton is good. You've got what's the other guy? The guy who got busted for pot, or was that Wheaton?
Oh, Le'Veon Bell.
Oh yeah, but yes. And then you've got a legit top shelf tailback coming out of the backfield.
Yeah, Steelers are scary. Steelers are that scary team that isn't in the playoffs right now. That every team hopes somehow loses another game they shouldn't lose, and then it somehow ends up out of the field. I think them in San Diego, because I mean San Diego, if they somehow managed to win every game and made the playoffs, I think they'd be very scary as well.
I think the Steelers are going to miss the playoffs this year, but not by much.
Well, I just feel like they're going to overtake the Ravens. I think the Ravens, while the Ravens are good on defense, I don't see the Ravens winning that division.
The Ravens just can't score.
Yeah, and I think the Steelers will beat them the second time they play. I don't see that. I'm tempted to take the Ravens to take the Dolphins this week because I just really don't have that much faith in the Ravens.
I don't either, but that's because I've watched them play and I'm looking at the numbers they're putting up and it's not very impressive. Now,
Yeah,
it is in Baltimore. That makes it a tougher game. But we'll see how it pans out.
we'll see. All right. Well, I'm going to go watch USC or not USC. I'll go watch Washington, Colorado. Any final thoughts for our viewers before we go?
I guess so. Obviously, we will have all the links to our various social media pages below. If you have any questions you'd like to ask us, you can tweet us at Diploma Sports. There'll be a link below, or you can find us on Gab, or you can send us a message on Minds or Facebook. Yeah, make sure to like the Facebook page if you enjoy our conversations. Yeah, and I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. I'm going to let Nick sign off.
All right, and I want to say, thank you everybody for listening. We look forward to having our immigration podcast up in the next week or so. Looking forward to a lively discussion there. Remember always to like our pages and give us any feedback that you have, and always keep the lively debate and never be afraid to hear other opinions because they will only strengthen yours. So with that, I want to say thank you and good night.
Yeah, good night.